Urban gardening is a fun, easy, and relatively new way to connect with gardening. Through our 2 sessions with Maison Vert, My Voice Youth learned about various techniques to growing greens both indoors and outdoors. We live in a capitalist society where, in most cases, profit is put over the consumer's own health and well-being. This has been the reality for quite some time, but it is true that things are changing. While healthier alternatives to a lot of the stuff that we eat are starting to pop up, they usually aren't accessible to the majority. The techniques that we learned in this video about urban gardening, however, are ones that almost anyone can start learning in order to make fresh greens accessible to themselves. I remember watching a film about Regent Park, a public housing community in Toronto. In the film, they spoke about a community garden in Regent Park and the impact that it had on the residents there. It was wonderful to see healthy and fresh food become accessible to the residents, to have food grown within the community for the community. So it's nice to see innovation being made within our spaces to ensure gardening and healthy eating is accessible to all communities and people. As Muslims, it's also important to understand the benefits to urban gardening that apply to our iman. In today's world, we often waste food and resources without putting too much thought into it. But being wasteful is a quality that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes. Urban gardening allows us to grow food for ourselves or our communities, and that'll hopefully push us to buy less at the grocery store and to eat out less. We often overconsume meat, sugar, and a lot of other things that we shouldn't be having. So the amount of greens that urban gardening will bring into our diet will hopefully help us have more balanced meals overall. For the first workshop session, we were provided with a variety of different microgreen seeds to choose to grow. Our first kits came with arugula, cabbage, mustard, pea, radish, and sunflower seeds. With such a variety of microgreens to choose to grow from, it's really important to understand the different needs that each microgreen will have. For example, cabbage seeds need to be soaked 4 to 6 hours before they're planted and have to be kept in the dark for around 2 to 3 days until germinated. Arugula, on the other hand, should not be soaked and only needs to be kept in the dark for a day, and in some cases 2. Microgreens such as sunflowers, which are much more complicated to grow, require you to have a solid understanding of the seed for you to be able to meet its needs.
The soil method for growing microgreens is a very easy and straightforward process, which only consists of 2 steps. I used this method to grow the pea seeds, which actually turned out really well. All you need for this method is a shallow container like this, along with your microgreens and your soil. Start off by adding a 1 to 2 inch layer of soil inside the container, or as much as you think would be good. Then take some of your microgreens and just spread them across the surface of the soil. Make sure to not add too many and keep spaces in between them for room to grow. Mist the soil and leave it in a dark place for the seeds to germinate. And once they germinate, leave them in a sunny place and keep watering them consistently every day. This is a very common gardening method that can be done easily at home any time of the day.
The paper towel method is an easier and quicker method to the soil method, and is my personal favorite because of how convenient it is. I was able to grow a small batch of arugula microgreens using this method. At first, I didn't fill my container up with enough water and the paper towel kept losing moisture, but later on I got the hang of it. I plan to use the method more moving forward to grow the rest of my microgreen seeds throughout the year. To get started on growing your microgreens with this method, first, make sure to get a container that has a flat lid. Make sure the surface of the lid has a wide enough area to grow a decent amount of microgreens. Next, you need to fill your container up with water. I recommend filling it up about 2/3. Now, before you close your lid, wrap the paper towel around the lid and push the lid onto the container. Alternatively, you can also create 2 holes in your container and put the towel through, but I find the first option easier. Now, take another paper towel and put it over the lid. This increases the surface that you cover. Place your seeds over the surface and leave it in a dark area until the leaves emerge. Remember to fill up the container as it runs out of water.
In the second workshop, we were taught how to garden indoors and how to clone. I feel like indoor gardening is more useful, especially over here since the weather is cold for more than half of the year. This also makes gardening much easier because you are able to have more control over your plants than you normally would. When gardening indoors, here's a list of things you will always need to get started: light, humidity, water, air circulation, and temperature. The air circulation prevents mold and fungus from growing on your plants, and the temperature should be ranging from about 15 to 20 degrees depending on the plant that you are trying to grow. This is just the bare minimum of what you need to grow your plants, but also the most important. Watering plants. Improper watering is a huge setback to gardening and can ruin the plant you are trying to grow. Here are some signs to tell if you are either over or underwatering your plants. Signs of overwatering. Overwatering your plants can cause wilting from the stem towards leaves, the lower leaves falling off, discoloration, and if the overall plant stops growing in general. Signs of underwatering. This can cause the leaves' outer tips to wilt and the edges to start turning brown, the soil becoming too dry, and if the leaves or flowers start dropping early.
Jumping from growing indoors to outdoors is a big step, but it's obviously an important one if you wish to continue to learn about gardening by gaining that experience yourself. If you wish to grow outdoors in the summer, you have 3 options to choose from. 1, by growing through a flatbed, 2, by growing through a raised bed, or by container gardening. The first 2 options work better if you have a backyard, and the last one is more so if you live in a condo or apartment, or you don't wish to plant as much. Planting outdoors is a year-round project. In the winter, you'll be planning out your garden and beginning to grow indoors. In the spring, you'll prepare your garden and move your seeds outdoors. Then, in the fall and summer, your plants will begin to be ready for harvest. After understanding that, you need to understand the following about the space that you're growing in. Water. Water is really important, so it's important to understand the relationship that water has to the space. Knowing how close a hose or sink is to the space that you're growing in is important because it'll really make your watering life easier. Sunlight. Most plants require 6 to 8 hours of sunlight to prosper and keep insects and diseases away, so it's important to be in a space where sunlight is available. Finally, soil. Rich, moist, and well-drained soil with sufficient nutrients is also vital in promoting healthy plant growth. Aside from that, there are 2 other considerations that you do need to keep in mind: climate and light. Knowing your climate zone is really important because it provides guidance on what vegetables will do well in your space and which ones won't. Light applies more to direction. You need to understand where the best spot is for growing your plants. It's important to aim for a south-facing spot that gets, like mentioned before, 6 to 8 hours of sunlight.
These workshops were a wonderful experience for many of us. And honestly, I think I may have learned more about gardening during these 2 workshops than I have in my entire life. From microgreens to cloning, we learned it all. In the past, I never really took an interest in gardening, but I definitely do now. Taking care of a plant almost feels like taking care of an actual child. And I think I speak on behalf of many people when I say this was a great opportunity for us that we don't often have. Thank you, Sister Nergis, for making this possible, and thank you so much to the presenters who planned out these workshops for us. I hope others can also learn from this experience and use this information to help them in their own gardening adventures.